Hour 9, our first hour with the Odyssey. We'll spend 3 hours on the Odyssey. It seems unfair when you think that we spent 8 hours on the Iliad, but it was harder to start with the Iliad. And not only that, we have problems with how to relate with Achilles, how to get used to the medium of epic. So I can justify spending 8 hours on the Iliad and only 3 hours on the Odyssey. Besides, we spent a lot of time understanding women's poetic traditions, especially as exemplified by Sappho. So to me, no apologies, no regrets. We just had to spend more time on the Iliad. But now that we're on the Odyssey, shouldn't I be intimidated by the fact that Odysseus is a multifaceted hero, whereas you can say many things about Achilles, but at least he was monolithic. He's very one-sided. He really knows what he's doing, at least after he's figured things out, whereas Odysseus is many-sided. The first words of the Odyssey say so. He is polu-tropos. That is to say, he can morph into a wide variety of different identities. And for what? In order to survive. The first 10 verses, or I just call them lines of the Odyssey, really tell you the whole Odyssey. We've seen this kind of thing where the beginning of a masterpiece of verbal art can usually say in a very compressed way what it's all about, and then go on and say in a very detailed and very expansive way the story as the big picture. And that story unfolds, and you see so many complications, and you'll see lots of complications in the Odyssey. His trajectory is not a straight line. It's zigging and zagging, and the straight line, so to speak, happens only after he finally reaches not just the homecoming to Ithaca, but his reestablishment of his own identity as the king of Ithaca, that is to say, the body politic of the community that lives in Ithaca, which is the kingdom of Ithaca. And it's a truism in anthropology that the king in most societies of the world is seen as the embodiment of the entire society. The king is the body politic. And that's what's really happening in the Odyssey. And even though there's lots of detours, there's lots of veering, in the end, it'll all get straightened out. A good way to introduce the heroism of Odysseus, or what makes Odysseus a hero, is to contemplate what makes Telemachus an imitator of a hero. And I'm saying imitator in a good way, in the sense that if you follow in the footsteps of somebody whose actions you admire, even from afar, you're likely to achieve the same kind of identity as your model. And in the case of Telemachus, the father has been away for 20 years, and Telemachus is stranded mentally, morally, and emotionally, in the sense that he has no model that matches the ultimate model for him, which is the father Odysseus. And what the Odyssey actually manages to convey is the striving of everybody to model themselves on their ancestors. And of course, the most immediate way to do that is to model yourself on your father or your mother. And that's what's happening in the Odyssey. And that's certainly what's happening to Telemachus. He starts off being, may I use the popular expression, clueless. And in the course of Rhapsodies 1, 2, 3, and 4, he finally gets fairly well reconnected with what the model, the heroic model for him is, which is his father, as he starts tracking down what is the kleos of the father and what is the nostos of the father. Now, interesting, isn't it, that I'm using the words kleos and nostos together? Certainly different from what we saw in the Iliad, where in Rhapsody 9, line 413, Achilles says that he has a choice between kleos which will give him a form of immortality in that he'll be remembered forever in song, or nostos, which is a safe homecoming. But those alternatives are mutually exclusive. That is to say, if he gets kleos, he cannot have a nostos. If he has nostos, he cannot have a kleos. Now, we all know what kleos means. It's not just glory, but the glory that is conferred by poetry. But what is nostos? Well, nostos is a song about homecoming. It's not just the homecoming, it's a song about homecoming. And to try to summarize maybe the entire set of agenda that we experience in the Odyssey, I would try to do it this way, that whereas the story of Achilles is that he ultimately makes the choice of a kleos and forgoes the option of a safe homecoming and living to a ripe old age, which would be nostos. Odysseus has his cake and eats it too. He has a kleos and he has a nostos. And in fact, this is the best part, his nostos is his kleos. That is to say, the story of his safe homecoming is what gives him the glory that will be preserved forever in the Song of the Odyssey. Now, that sounds like an advantage over Achilles, doesn't it? But there is also a disadvantage, and that is that Odysseus would dearly love to have a kleos that is based on the fact that it was his intelligence, his cunning intelligence, that resulted in the success of the Achaeans. And that, what is that success? The destruction of Troy. And that's what we see already in lines 1 and lines 2 of Rhapsody 1 of the Odyssey. You'd think that that would be the big accomplishment of Odysseus. I'm an epic hero because I destroyed Troy. But you know, it's not the case. It cannot be, because that role of being the epic hero of the Trojan War is preempted. And it's preempted by whom? By Achilles. Isn't it ironic that Achilles, whose physical power was not able to destroy Troy, gets to be the number one hero of the Iliad, and not Odysseus, who actually succeeded where Achilles failed? Doesn't matter. It's Achilles who is the primary hero of the Iliad. He is the hero of the Trojan War, and therefore, if Odysseus is going to have anything comparable, it's not going to be the fact that he destroyed Troy. He has to give up on being the primary hero of the Trojan War simply because he succeeded where Achilles failed. No, Odysseus can only get kleos by way of nostos. So maybe I should revise what I said earlier when I said Odysseus can have his cake and eat it too. A better way to put it is that the only way that Odysseus can have kleos is not to be the number one hero of the Trojan War, but rather to concentrate on not just a safe homecoming, but then reestablishing his identity after he gets home. And that takes a long while, as you know, as you start reading the second half of the Odyssey in the course of your reading. It'll take a long time for Odysseus to prove to himself and to everybody on Ithaca that he really is the king of Ithaca, that he really is the embodiment of society.